Good morning, everybody. Today we shall discuss the topic verb. Now, what are verbs? First, let us look at the definition of the word verb. Please look at your monitors. The traditional definition of a verb. What is a verb? It indicates action. It is also considered a state or a condition. This definition does not deal with the grammatical features of a verb. Now, how are we to understand the grammatical characteristics of a verb? Verbs like nouns have typical derivational suffixes and take specific inflectional suffixes to mark their grammatical features. Now, we shall understand the derivational suffixes that we add to the words of other classes so that we derive what the verbs. Now, look at these suffixes. ify, purify, simplify, modify. Words ending with ifi, purify, simplify, modify. Words ending with ize, memorize, globalize, computerize. Words ending with en, strengthen, brighten, threaten. And words ending with ate, motivate, designate, liquidate. These suffixes, which I have already told you, ify, to give you another example, glorify or purify or amplify, ize, polarize or neutralize, en, frighten, brighten, weaken, flatten, ate, motivate, designate, can be said to mark the words in which they occur as verbs. Now, having understood the derivational suffixes, let us first try to understand that a verb in English takes 4 inflectional suffixes. What are those 4 inflectional suffixes? The simple present tense suffix yes / es occurs in the case of third person singular subjects. When I say third person singular subject, I mean to say that in third person singular, the verb takes yes or es forms. To give you an example, I walk first person singular, we walk first person plural, you walk second person singular, you walk second person plural, he, she, it takes what? Walks. And that is he, she, it takes what? They take the S form. He, she, it walks. And then they walk. Take doesn't take an S form. Now, look at the simple past tense. It is followed by suffix what, ed. Since I have started with the verb walk, I shall continue with the verb walk. I walked, we walked in first person, second person singular, you walked, he, she, it walked and they walked. That is, in past tense, it shall take which form? It shall take an ed form, walked, in past tense. In progressive tense, what does the particular suffix form? the suffix is ing. I have started with the word walk. I shall continue with the word walk, and the verb takes which particular suffix? The verb takes the suffix ing form. In perfective or passive suffix, which form is taken? The form ed is taken. Now, these are the 4 suffixes you should take into account when you understand or try to understand how the verb takes these inflectional suffixes. Let me repeat once again. In simple present tense, it takes the yes or es form depending upon the third person singular subjects. In simple past tense, it takes the ed form. In progressive tense, it takes the suffix ing form, and in perfective or passive, the suffix ed is taken. Now, having understood these 4 inflections, let us try to understand these inflections with reference to the particular sentences. Now, what are these sentences? First, let us try to understand the sentences. Secondly, we shall underline the verb, and since I have already stated these verbs are in which tense? These verbs are in simple present tense. So, let us first try to mark the words and see whether it takes an S or an ES forms. Now, the first sentence, he walks every day in the morning. Which is a verb here? As you see, the verb yes, I said yes form. So, naturally, which is a verb here? Yes. Walk is a verb. He is third person singular. So, it has taken a suffix yes. So, he walks every day in the morning. The simple present tense takes which suffix? Yes form. Now, third person singular, she teaches English. Here, the word teach has taken which form? Es form, teaches. Third person singular. Vinay plays football, or he plays football, or she plays football. Here also, which is the suffix it has taken? It has taken the suffix yes. The fourth example, he designs dresses for small boy. So, here also the word yes is taken. Now, why not dresses? Dresses is a noun, namapada. Idu bahuvachanadalli ide, dresses. So, though it has taken an es form, don't get confused. It is not a verb. Now, look at the explanation. Yes and es only when the subject of the verb is in the third person singular. If it is not in third person singular, it shall not take yes or an es form. Now, this particular second inflectional suffixes I have given. What is that? The simple past tense takes the suffix ed. Now, here first let us identify the verb. Lived is a verb in the first sentence. Opened is a verb in the second sentence. Walked is a verb in the third sentence. Booked is a verb in the fourth sentence. Here, I have said simple past tense takes the suffix ed. Now, live past tense is what? Lived. What is the sentence? They lived at Bangalore. The second sentence, the verb is open, opened. She opened the door. Which is a suffix? Ed is a suffix. Open the door. Third one, Raju walked to the college. Which is a suffix? Ed is a suffix. Walked. They booked me a ticket. Which is a suffix? Ed is a suffix. Now, they booked me a ticket. Now, we have found in all the 4 sentences, the simple past tense, which is a suffix, ed is a suffix. Now let's try to understand what happens with special reference to the irregular verbs. All along we have studied the regular verbs. Now what happens with irregular verbs? With irregular verbs, it will not take an ed form in the past tense. I have just given you 5 examples of irregular verbs, but in regular verbs it takes an ed form in the past tense. In irregular verb, it does not take an ed form. So that would mean you will have to study and understand 2 sets of verbs in English. One is the regular verbs, the other one is the irregular verbs. Now let us try to understand the list of irregular verbs that I have given. Feed past tense is fed. Fight, fought. See, sought. Find, found. Buy, bought. Now these verbs do not take an ed form. Even in the present tense of the irregular verb, if you have to make it into past tense, it is not feeded, it is fed. It is not foughted, it is fought. It is not seed, it is saw. It is not finded, it is found. It is not buyed, it is bought. Or even in the past tense, it does not take an ed form. Fedded, foughted, sawed, founded, bought. Especially here, it does not take an ed form. Irregular verbs. The third suffix which we have to study now is the progressive aspect. Now what are the things that come in the progressive aspect? First, let us try to understand the rule. In the progressive aspect, the ing suffix is added to the main verb and the appropriate form of auxiliary verb, that is be verb, is used. Auxiliary be is used. So let us try to understand this particular progressive aspect with the help of these examples. The children are playing. What is the? The is an article or determiner. What is children? Children is subject. What is are playing? Are playing is a verb. Now what is are? Are is an auxiliary verb. What is play? Play is a lexical verb. What is ing? Ing is a progressive aspect. So that would mean in the progressive aspect, what is the rule or the formula we follow? We follow first the verb. Verb plus. Second one is what? Lexical verb. This is auxiliary verb. I have written a short form. Next is lexical verb or the main verb plus this particular verb takes which form? ing form. So whenever you are writing sentences in progressive aspect, make sure that your sentences have these auxiliary verbs. Students tend to miss out these auxiliary verb, especially when they make a reference in the progressive aspect. Let us look at the second sentence. She is driving a car. As usual, she is what? Subject. Is what? Verb. Is what? Once again an auxiliary verb. Drive, the main verb or lexical verb, ing. She is driving a car. The third sentence, we were learning music. We subject, were auxiliary verb, learn plus ing form, learning music, verb plus ing form. He is leaving now. He is subject, is what? Auxiliary verb, leave is what? The main verb. It is followed by which form? An ing form. This is the progressive aspect, the third suffix that we have learnt. Now let us learn the perfective aspect suffix, that is ed. Now, in the perfective aspect suffix ed, you have two things that you have to keep in mind. The children have returned home. Now, compare the perfective aspect with simple past. In simple past, we had just said the children returned home. We never use the word have. Here in perfective aspect, we use the word have or had or has, depending upon the form of the noun. Whichever noun we use these auxiliary verbs have, had and has. So, what is the rule we need to follow? You have what is called once again an auxiliary verb plus the perfective aspect, that is the verb, and this verb takes which form? An ed form. It takes which form? The past participle form of the verb. So, children have. Why I use the word have? I am using the word children in plural. So, children have are returned takes which form? ed form, home. I have returned your book. Or since I have repeated the same verb, I will give you another verb. I have borrowed your book. Borrow, borrowed. Return, returned, ed. We had reviewed your article. We had is there, auxiliary verb. Review takes an ed form. Reviewed your article. The doctor has tested her. So, test ed. Now, what happens in perfective aspect is that you have found there are three auxiliary verbs that are used. What are they? You have an auxiliary have, then you have another auxiliary had, and then you have another auxiliary has. Depending upon these auxiliary, what comes? You have to use the past perfective form of the verb, one. Secondly, why are these auxiliary used? These auxiliaries are used to represent which particular aspect? The perfective aspect. Point number one. The second point you need to remember is that whether the nouns are plural or singular, you use these particular auxiliary verbs. Third point to remember is that you have to use these auxiliary verbs depending upon the time reference also, whether the verb is used in the past or the present time reference. Having understood the inflectional suffixes, we shall look into the syntactic features of the verb. Now, what are the syntactic features? It depends on the function of a verb, whether the verb are lexical verbs, whether they are primary auxiliaries or modal auxiliaries. It depends on the three important function of the verb, whether it functions as lexical verbs, primary auxiliary or modal auxiliary. Now, lexical verbs. Lexical verbs are those verbs which have an independent meaning that is clear and definable. It has an independent meaning. It is very clear and it is definable. I have given you this example. They go to college. Now, the lexical verb go has independent meaning. It is definable also. Other examples of the lexical verbs are sleep, drink, walk, summarize, forget, eat, teach, make, hit, etc. The list is never ending. Now, there are three types of verbs that occur in the verb phrases, and these three types of verbs only perform the functions. So, we have understood the first type, that is the lexical verbs. Now, let us look into the primary auxiliaries. Now, what are primary auxiliaries? The primary auxiliary have, be and do can occur before a lexical verb. Now, first let us try to understand the primary auxiliary. Have takes which form? Have takes which form? Has, have, had. Be takes which form? Is, are, was, were, am. Do takes which form? Does, do, did. All the three auxiliaries have the past tense and the present tense forms. Now, more than one of these can occur with the lexical verb. An important feature of these primary auxiliaries is that they can function either as auxiliary verbs or as lexical verbs. Now, let us look at these examples. They have gone home. Now, which is the auxiliary verb? Have in the first sentence. Which is a lexical verb? Gone. So, it is auxiliary verb plus lexical verb. I am sorry, I am writing in the short form. Let us take the second example. She has an old house. You only have what verb? Auxiliary verb. You don't have any other verb. She is a fashion designer. You only have what verb? Auxiliary verb. He does everything himself. You only have the do form of the verb, that is does. And then she did the job. You only have the did, that is the do form of the verbs. So, in all these examples you could see that you have an auxiliary verb. Only in one example you have an auxiliary verb plus lexical verb. In the rest of the examples we have only the auxiliary verb. So, in order to understand the verbs, first we have to understand the primary auxiliary. Have takes three forms: has, have, had. Be, is, are, was, were and am. Do, does, did. These are the primary auxiliaries. Now, let us take the modal auxiliaries. Can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must, must. I am sorry, the word shall, should is repeated twice, and then it is must, must. These are the modal auxiliaries. Now, modal auxiliaries take both the past form could, would, should, might, must, and they also take which form? The present form: can, will, shall, may, must. These are the modal auxiliaries. Now, let us study the examples. We can do this work. Now, the word can is what? As I have told you a moment ago, it is a modal auxiliary. Secondary auxiliaries or modal auxiliaries. Now, this is followed by which word? Do. We can do this work. The second one, we would go to the bookstore. Would, modal auxiliary, go, lexical verb. I will attend the classes. Will, modal auxiliary, attend, lexical verb. I shall write a letter. Shall, modal auxiliary, write is a lexical verb. Now, if you see the whole structure of the sentence, you can find modal auxiliaries can, may, will, shall, must occur in the leftmost position before the lexical verb. 4 of them, can, may, will and shall, can occur in the present or the past tense form. So, where does it occur? In the leftmost position. Now, let us try to understand the whole thing with the help of a formula. That is, you have modal auxiliary MA, I am writing MA, plus you have a lexical verb LV. Now, this is how the structure is followed with reference to what? The modal auxiliary. Now, in all the sentences, the modal auxiliaries have occurred in the leftmost position. The second feature is that the modal auxiliaries take both the present as well as the past form. Verbs are further divided into 2 types, finite and non-finite. What is a finite verb? A finite verb is limited in terms of number, person and tense. Already we have studied number, singular or plural, person, first person, second person, third person, tense. Just now we have understood 2 tenses, the past and the present. Now, what are the examples? The verbs such as sings, listens, dances occur in only third person singular. Now, let us try to understand these examples. If I say in simple present tense, I sing, singular, in first person, we sing, plural, you sing in the second person, and in the third person, the word sings comes. Sings, he sings, she sings, it sings. So, where does it occur? It occurs only in third person singular. Because it occurs only in third person singular, it is limited, and that is why we call these words as what? Finite verbs. Similarly, sang, listened, danced are limited to past tense only. So, we call them once again these words as finite verbs. Why? They are limited to past tense only, but can be used with any number and person. Whereas, in a third person singular, these words sings, listens, dances cannot be used with any number and person, whereas these verbs can be used in any number and person. So, this is the first difference between the finite and the non-finite verb. What is that? Finite verb is limited in terms of number, person and tense. Let us see the list of finite verbs with the help of an example. Now, finite verbs take what suffixes? It takes the suffixes yes or an es. The third suffix past tense it takes. It also takes a suffix that takes a modal plus verb format. So, it takes 3 suffixes. What are they? Yes, es. The third one ed, that too in what tense? The past tense. And the fourth way to identify a finite verb is that it has this formula, modal plus verb. Now, let us look at the sentences. What did I say? It takes an yes or an es. She writes regularly. Now, this particular sentence, writes, has taken what finite form of verb? Yes. So this is a finite verb, writes. If I take another word, she teaches regularly, teach, T-E-A-C-H, teaches, E-S. So she teaches regularly. Here also it has taken which form? An ES form. Second one, ED. I wanted to buy a car. Look at this particular sentence. It is in what tense? It is in past tense. What suffix has it taken? It has taken the suffix ed. I wanted to buy a car. So it is in finite form. Now, the third way to identify a finite verb is that it takes modal plus verb. Which is a modal here? We can go to the market. Which is a modal here? Yes, you're right. Can is a modal. Now, go is what? A verb. Can is a modal auxiliary and go is what? A verb. So, these are the three ways in which we identify. One is S/ES suffix, ed in past time reference. Third one is modal plus verb. Having understood the finite verb, let us try to understand the non-finite verbs. Non-finite verbs take which form? An ing form. It takes an ed form. Now comes a problem. What is that? In finite also, the verb took an ed form. In non-finite also, it is taking an ed form. So, what is the difference between a finite and a non-finite verb? There, in the finite verb, the ed form was taken by what? By past tense, only past tense. Here, the finite form is taken by the perfective aspect. You remember, a moment ago I told you three auxiliary verbs that occur in the perfective aspect: have, has, had. Along with that, the verb takes the past participle form. So, it is the perfective aspect. So, here perfective. Third one is it takes the passive form, that is the ed form, the passive ed form. Look at these sentences. We were watching TV. Where is what? The primary auxiliary. Watch has taken which form? An ing form. So, non-finite verb comes with ing forms. Second, she had gone home. The word had is a modal auxiliary. The word gone is a lexical verb. So, she had gone home. Now, had gone is in which aspect? It is in the perfective aspect. Third one, ed with passive. The dog was looked after by the small boy. Small boy. Now, let me change this form into active. The small boy looked after the dog. Now, this ed should be in which particular form? It should be in the passive form. So, there are three eds that you need to remember. In the finite form, when the verb takes an ed, it means it is in simple past. Don't forget, it's in past tense, ed form, simple past or past tense. Secondly, in the non-finite form, if it takes a suffix ed, the verb is in which particular aspect? Perfective aspect. Third, in the non-finite form, if the verb takes an ed, then the verb should be in which form? The verb should be in the passive form. That is, the dog was looked after by the small boy. So, it is in which construction? Passive construction. The second division of the verb is that intransitive verbs and transitive verbs. Let us try to understand what an intransitive verb is and what a transitive verb is. Intransitive verbs do not take an object. These verbs are not followed by any other object. Thus, these verbs are followed by nothing, you can say. Look at the sentence. The children smiled. It has not taken an object. My friends are working. It doesn't say where. It ends the sentence here. Dogs bark. Where does dog bark? It doesn't say. Or at whom the dog bark? It doesn't say. The fourth one, all the children have arrived. Where have all the children arrived? It doesn't say. So, all these verbs are intransitive. It has not taken an object. Now, comparatively, transitive verbs are those which take an object. It doesn't simply say I ate. Look at that, I ate. It takes an object, an apple. She bought a car. Object. They love dance. They love dance. Or they love music. Why? Look at that, the word love has taken an object. That is, they love dance. Then, I wished all my friends a happy new year. There are two objects here. I wished all my friend is one object. A happy new year is another object. So, you have object number 1 and object number 2. I ate an apple, an object. She bought a car, object. They love dance, an object. Then, I wished all my friends a happy new year. Two objects are found here. So, this is a difference between a transitive verb and an intransitive verb. Another aspect of the verb that you need to study and remember is that tense. Tense is a grammatical feature of which verb? Finite verb. Non-finite verbs by definition do not have tense. In English, we have two tenses, the present and the past. The present tense is marked by suffixes yes/es in the case of third person singular, whereas in all other cases the bare form of the verb is used. Now, let us try to understand these two tenses. You will be surprised what happened to the word future tense. There is no future tense in English. It is only future time reference. First, let us understand the present tense. He, she, it in third person singular, the verb takes which particular suffix? Yes or an es. Whereas, in first person singular and plural, I, we, second person you, third person they, or I have given you another noun, his friends, the verb does not change at all. That is, the present tense here is marked by the suffix yes or an es. In this case, it is marked by yes. In third person singular, that is he, she, it, whereas in all other cases, the bare form of the verb is used. The verb does not change at all. Now, let us look at the role of primary auxiliary here. The primary auxiliary be, have and do also has yes or es forms, such as, what is your yes or es form? It doesn't take like a lexical verb. It has these forms. Yes, is, be becomes is, have becomes has, do becomes what? Does. It takes an S form, S or an ES form in this manner. Modal auxiliaries do not take an S or an ES form. Lexical verbs only take an S or an ES form. Primary auxiliaries only take an S or an ES form. Modal auxiliaries do not have an S or an ES form. In the past tense, it is marked by the suffix ed. The past tense, as we saw, is marked by the suffix ed in most of the cases and by a different form of the verb in case if it is an irregular verb. If it is a regular verb, it is marked by an ed. If it is not a regular verb, it is also marked not by ed but the past tense of the irregular verb. Now first let us understand the past tense form. He, she, it, they lived in Bangalore. There is no change. I, we, you, once again they, I have written as his friends, lived in Bangalore. In both the cases there is no change at all. I have here used a regular verb. If I use the word, let us say irregular word, bought. I bought a house, we bought a house, you bought a house, you bought a house, he bought a house, she bought a house, it bought a house and they bought a house. Here also there is no change in the past tense form. I have already given you an example which I showed you in my previous slide. He, she, it, they bought a house. I, we, you, his friends bought a house. Now what happens with primary auxiliaries? Primary auxiliaries be, have, do have past tense forms also. What are the past tense forms? For be you have the past tense form was and were. For have you have the past tense form had, and for do you have the past tense form of did. Modals also have past tense form. Can takes the past tense of could, will takes the past tense of would, shall takes the past tense of should, may takes the past tense of might. Now let us see the auxiliary verbs, that is the be verbs. I will be coming to your house. Now this is the modal auxiliary. I will be coming to your house. They have cancelled the trip. Have once again is a primary auxiliary. It takes an ed form, that is the past perfect form. So it is in the perfective aspect. It is cold here. The word is what? Primary auxiliary. It rained heavily. It has taken an ed form. It is in which tense? The past tense. Now, in order to understand the verbs in great detail, let us try to understand in which positions these verbs occupy. Verb occurs after a subject. It doesn't come in certain sentences before a subject. Now, in the first sentence, can you identify the verb? You are right. The boys have left. The verb is have. Have is what? Primary auxiliary. Where has it come? It has come after a subject. Which is a subject here? Boy is a subject here. The second example, the train has arrived. Yes, has is a primary auxiliary. Train is what? The subject. Now, this has is a primary auxiliary, arrived is a lexical verb. Now, where has the verb occurred in this particular sentence? The verb has occurred after a subject. This is the first positioning of the verb that you can identify and you have to understand. The second one is verbs occur before any object. First, let us identify the object in the sentence. I like cars. You're right, car is an object. We studied English. English is an object. I gave them tea. Tea is an object. Right? Now, let us look at the occurrence of the verb. Where has the verb occurred? The verb has occurred where in the first sentence before an object. Like is a verb. Object is cars. In the second sentence it has occurred before an object. Studied. In the third sentence it has occurred before an object, that is gave. Now what happens in an interrogative sentence? What is the meaning of the word interrogative or interrogative sentence as it were? The meaning is ಪ್ರಶ್ನಾರ್ಥಕ ದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವ sentences, ವಾಕ್ಯಗಳು. Now here the word, especially verb, is inverted and instead of the subject you get in the first position. What is the first position? The verb takes the first position. Let me give you this particular example which is there on your monitor. Have you read this book? Now first try to understand the sentence. If I have to state the sentence in a statement or a declarative sentence, it could be you have read this book. This is a declarative sentence. Now what has happened in an interrogative sentence? I have inverted. I have put the verb in the first position. I have put the subject in the second position. Now what have I said? Have you read this book? Understand? Now here the first auxiliary verb occurs before the subject. It comes what? Before the subject. And the rest of the verb phrase, read this book, is a verb phrase. It has come after the subject. So in an interrogative sentence, you can see the verb coming in the first position. Let us look at the second sentence. Will you come to my house? Will you is what? You is what? Subject. Come to my house. Look at this. If I have to convert it into a statement, it would be you will come to my house. Now I am using it in which form? An interrogative form. It should followed by a question mark. Now, will you come to my house? Will is what? Modal auxiliary. You is what? Subject. Rest of the verb phrase, come to my house, is what? Is coming. Where does it come? It comes after the rest of the subject. So, will you occurs before the subject. That is, here will occurs before the subject. The third sentence, has he been sleeping all the time? Here, if I have to use it in the form of a statement, I shall say, he has been sleeping all the time. Instead, I have inverted. What is the inversion I have done? I have said, has he been sleeping? So, has is what? Verb. It is a primary auxiliary verb. He is what? Subject. Been sleeping all the time is what? A verb phrase. So, in an interrogative sentence, first you will have what? The verb phrase followed by what? Subject. Plus you have the verb, phrase. I am using a short form here. Now, what happens in a negative sentence? We have studied in an interrogative sentence. We have studied the verbs occur before an object. We have also said the verbs occur after a subject. Now, what happens in a negative sentence? In a negative sentence, with inversion, the verb is split. If you have an inversion, the verb is split. She has not come to the college. It's a straightforward sentence. The word not has occurred before a primary auxiliary. It comes in between the lexical verb. The second one is never has the boy scored such low marks. Instead of the word not, I have used another negative marker, that is never. Now, instead of telling the boy has never scored such low marks, I have said never has the boy. So, there is an inversion here, never. Why? Negative is taken as in the first position, negative marker is taken in the first position, and then there is inversion and the verb is split. Now, instead of telling has scored, I have split the verb. In imperative sentence, what are imperative sentence? Imperative sentence are those sentences which carry command and request. What happens in an imperative sentence? It generally do not have subject. The verb occurs in the first position. Look at the sentence. Fill in the blanks with an appropriate verb. Now, instead of telling you fill in the blank, it starts with what? Fill in the blanks. You find this sentence very common in the question paper. Write your name and address. Instead of telling you write your name and address, which also you find in many application forms written, write your name and address. Here the verb occurs in the first position. Next is verb should agree with subject in number and person. Now, I go to the library regularly. Here I have started with the word go. Now, I have used first person I. So, naturally it should have agree. Here I have taken the simple present form. He writes. It should agree with the subject and person. In the third sentence, the boys in the bus were making a lot of noise. I have used the plural form boys. So, naturally what tense marker should I use? What primary auxiliary should I use? It is where. Then I have used the second person you. Naturally I should use what? Are. Let us do a quick recap of what we learned today. I began telling you the morphological features of the tense. What did I say? It takes specific suffixes, derivational suffixes IFI, IZE, EN, ATE. It takes 4 inflectional suffixes SES, ED, ING and ED. Then I gave you the example. Then there is a whole list of irregular verbs, then followed by progressive suffix aspect suffix ing, then perfective aspect suffix ed, followed by syntactic features, 3 ways in which we can understand the verb, the lexical verbs, the primary auxiliary, the modal auxiliaries. First example was given on lexical verbs, followed by primary auxiliaries, have, has, had. Be is, are, was, were, am. Do is, does, do, did. Then I gave you the examples. The modal auxiliaries does take a past tense form. Then I gave you the example. The verbs are divided into 2 types, finite and non-finite. I gave you the example of finite form, then non-finite form. Then we went on to understand intransitive and transitive verbs. Then the grammatical feature of the finite verb is what? Tense. 2 tenses. What happens in the present tense? Then in the past tense. Then past tense with irregular verbs. Then with what happens with primary auxiliaries. Followed by auxiliary with be verbs. Then the verb occurs after a subject, that is positioning of the verb. Verbs occur before any object. In interrogative sentence, you find the verbs in the first position. Then in negative sentence, if it is an inversion, the verb is split. In an imperative sentence, which generally do not have a subject, the verb occurs in the first position. A simple example is close the door. You don't say you close the door, we say close the door. Then the verb should agree with the subject in number and person. So today we have understood the verbs. Thank you.